The reindeer were about the size of Shetland ponies, and their hair was so white that even the snow hardly looked white compared to them. Their branching horns were gilded and shone like something on fire when the sunrise caught them. Their harness was of scarlet leather and covered with bells. On the sledge, driving the reindeer, sat a fat dwarf who would have been about 3 feet high if he had been standing. He was dressed in polar bear's fur, and on his head he wore a red hood with a long gold tassel hanging down from its point. His huge beard covered his knees and served him instead of a rug. But behind him, on a much higher seat in the middle of the sledge, sat a very different person, a great lady, taller than any woman that Edmund had ever seen. She also was covered in white fur up to her throat, and held a long, straight, golden wand in her hand, and wore a golden crown on her head. Her face was white, not merely pale, but white like snow or paper or icing sugar, except for her very red mouth. It was a beautiful face in all other respects, but proud and cold and stern. The sledge was a fine sight, as it came sweeping towards Edmund with the bells jingling and the dwarf cracking his whip and the snow flying up on each side of it. "Stop," said the lady, and the dwarf pulled the reindeer up so sharply that they almost sat down. Then they covered themselves and stood chomping at the bits and blowing. In the frosty air, the breath coming out of their nostrils looked like smoke. "And what, pray, are you?" said the lady, looking hard at Edmund. My name's Edmund," said Edmund, rather awkwardly. He did not like the way she looked at him. The lady frowned. "Is that how you would dress a queen?" she asked, looking sterner than ever. "I beg your pardon, your majesty. I didn't know," said Edmund. "Not know the Queen of Narnia?" cried she. "Ha! You shall know us better hereafter. But I repeat, what are you?" "Please, your majesty," said Edmund, "I don't know what you mean. I'm at school. At least I was. It's the holidays now." Hello everybody and welcome back to Faithful Fables. Today we are going to be continuing our dive into The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and we will be taking a closer look at the self-proclaimed Queen of Narnia and the Empress of the Lone Islands, otherwise known as the White Witch. Before we get started, I wanted to just remind everybody that my links are in the description of this episode, so you have my website, my YouTube, and my Instagram, and yes, there's even links to send me a message if you have a comment or just something you'd like to share. Feel free to do that, and you may or may not have your message featured in a future episode. I mean, we'll see. We got to have that happen first. But there's also a link in the description to support the show. Don't feel obligated to. This is totally like if you want to, you can. There's a few different amounts there that you can choose from, but yeah, anyways. For this episode, I will be focusing on her appearance in this book alone. We read her origin story in The Magician's Nephew, but we will get there in a later episode. In the beginning, I read the first time that the readers are introduced to the White Witch, assuming you are reading this series in Lewis's intended reading order. The way that Lewis describes this is actually very beautiful, in my opinion. The imagery is very vivid. The reindeer were the size of Shetland ponies. For some reason, when I imagined the reindeer being the size of Shetland ponies, in my limited knowledge on the subject and not actually knowing what they look like, I assumed that they were big horses, but I feel like I was thinking about something else, because when I looked up Shetland ponies, they are little teapots, basically, short and stout. They're like Scottish mini ponies, essentially, and they came up to just under 4 feet tall. So definitely not at all what I was imagining. And their hair was so white that even the snow hardly looked white compared to them. Being Canadian, I'm very familiar with snow. And if you have ever seen pure, untouched white, it is actually very bright to the point where even if it is dark outside, it's not like it's pitch black, because the white is so bright that it just, I don't know, it's really, really cool. It fascinates me. So the fact that the reindeer hair, like the hair of the reindeer was even whiter, is a crazy but beautiful thing to imagine. Lewis continues to describe the horns, that they were gilded and shone like something on fire when the sunrise caught them. But the witch wasn't alone on her sledge. C.S. Lewis describes her dwarf companion in a way that I find funny. He just calls him how it is. He calls it how it is. He describes him as a fat dwarf, about 3 feet high, with a red hood and polar bear fur. He also has a huge beard that covers his knees. And so I just found this kind of funny. I'm just imagining this little dwarf. He's fat, he's short, he's covered in fur, he's got a red hood. Just kind of like, I don't know, almost seems like a classic image to me in my head. Now, to take a little bit of a look at the witch's physical appearance, it is described that she is taller than any woman Edmund has ever seen, and it's believed that she is around 7 feet tall. Now, I am not going to get too much into her backstory here, but it is believed that she has giant's blood in her, and so that would explain why she is tall. She is covered in fur up to her throat and has a long, straight golden wand and is wearing a golden crown. So we see already she is presenting herself as a queen, even though, as we will learn in a little bit, that she is actually not a queen. Her face is pale white, and it's described as being not merely pale, but white like snow or paper or icing sugar, except for her very red mouth. Now, if you imagine snow, paper, or icing sugar, these are very white things. I mean, even take a piece of paper and put it on your arm, kind of wrap it around your arm, and imagine that's how white your skin is. That's how white she was. It was very white. And I imagine that, that would be something people don't really see a whole lot of. I mean, at least I don't see people that white. But I like that C.S. Lewis gives us multiple options on how to imagine just how pale she really is. And Edmund thinks she's beautiful, and the description actually ends with saying that it was a beautiful face in other respects, but proud and cold and stern. Now, I don't know if C.S. Lewis writing in that her face looked cold, I don't know if that's supposed to be a pun, just because of the situation that we're going to talk about next. But I think if that's a pun, I think that is very clever on his part. So as we come into Narnia in the actual story, once we get to Narnia, we see that it's winter. Now, I'm sure at this point, I may have mentioned this briefly in another episode, but I want to touch on why it is winter in Narnia. The White Witch cast an enchantment spell over Narnia that made it a perpetual winter of ice and snow that lasted from Narnia year 900 to 1000. So 100 years of just perpetual winter and ice. Now, again, sometimes up here in Canada, our winters feel like it's 100 years long, but I can't imagine it actually being that long. So why did she do this? Why did she make it a perpetual winter? This This oppression, it was an oppressive thing, really, was meant to keep the people of Narnia in a state of submission and ultimately create a state of hopelessness. And this is how she was able to get away with calling herself a queen. She put them in this state of, hopelessness, basically. The spell also made sure that there would be no chance of any silver apples growing in Narnia. The significance of that we will also discover in Magician's Nephew. But in short, the silver apples created the Tree of Protection, which prevented her from using her magic. So without the ability of these apples to grow and create this Tree of Protection, she could use her magic then. And so that was another reason for the winter. The spell also kept Father Christmas, or we may know him as Santa Claus, from coming to Narnia and providing a potential aid to any possible resistance from the Narnians. Any Narnians that wanted to fight against her, she wanted to prevent anything from helping them. So that meant Father Christmas, nah, you gone. You can't come here. And so along with this enchantment, she also drove out all other humans from Narnia by either banishing them to other countries or by other violent methods. This was to make sure that the prophecy would not come true. The Golden Age prophecy, as I mentioned in the other episode, foretold that she would one day be overthrown by 2 sons of Adam and 2 daughters of Eve. It goes like this. Wrong will be right when Aslan comes in sight. At the sound of his roar, sorrows will be no more. When he bares his teeth, winter will meet its death. And when he shakes his mane, we shall have spring again. When Adam's flesh and Adam's bone sits at Cair Paravel enthroned, the evil time will be over and done. So I read that in the last episode, this part about Adam's flesh and Adam's bone sitting at Cair Paravel. I don't believe I mentioned that part. That is another part of it, and a very true part. And so that is probably the biggest reason that she wanted to just drive all the other humans out of Narnia. And so that is why we see that. And I mean, I get it. If I knew that was a thing, I would do everything that I can to prevent it as well, especially if I am an evil witch hell-bent on domination and control. It is the Golden Age prophecy. But if you notice, there are actually 3 prophecies in it. So the first is that spring will return to Narnia when Aslan comes. Evil will be gone from Narnia when Adam's flesh and Adam's bone sits on the thrones at Cair Paravel. That's the second prophecy. And the third, 4 thrones are there, 2 sons of Adam, 2 daughters of Eve. So I guess there's 3 points within the prophecy. And it's kind of cool. And I wonder if one of them didn't happen, could the others happen? So like, let's say Aslan didn't come back. Okay, so we would still have winter. But then could evil be gone from Narnia if sons of Adam and daughters of Eve sit on the throne? That's kind of what I mean. Could the other parts of the prophecy come true if one doesn't? I mean, I would like to think no. But it's just something fun, like I thought of. Like, what if when the children were in Narnia, the witch went and destroyed their thrones, or even Cair Paravel itself? Because, I mean, it existed, as far as I know, it existed. And so why not just, I don't know, like maybe Aslan would have prevented this, or maybe he would have rebuilt it. But that's kind of the thoughts that I had on that. And so during this time, we call this the long winter. During this time, she was calling herself the Queen of Narnia. But the Narnians started referring to her simply as the White Witch, which seems like a more suitable title. So I want to now talk about some of her abilities. Like I mentioned, she is a witch, and so she's going to have some abilities. And so I want to talk about those to kind of paint a picture of who she really is and what we're really dealing with here when we read about her. So she's a very powerful sorceress and has mysterious abilities about her. In her time in exile, again, this is part of her backstory, but she was in exile. Before she cast this enchantment, making it winter, she developed some magical tools, including a magic wand that could turn any living creature into stone. It didn't kill the victims, but it left them in a state of suspended animation. She, at one point in time, did something similar to herself, but again, we will talk about that in a later episode. And this kind of reminds me of, I'm sure no one listening has, well, maybe one or two of you, my mom probably has, but heard of the show Fringe. In Fringe, they have what's called an amber protocol, where when something's going down, they disperse this gas and it kind of freezes everybody in amber. And it's basically this, man, I don't even know how to describe it, but basically, yeah, you're not dead and you're kind of like aware. I don't know if it's the same with being turned into stone, but in this show, at least, you're aware of every moment, every waking moment, but you can't do anything. You're just frozen in your spot. And so that kind of reminded me of her turning these creatures into stone, where they're not dead, but they're stone. The other tool that she made for herself was a magic potion that made it so she could turn snow into food, which must have also been used to control Narnians in an icy land, where food was probably very difficult to come by. The food that was created from this was also terribly addictive, and those who ate of it would always want more and more and more. And I mean, as we're going to see later with Edmund, he eats some of this enchanted food, and like for the rest of the book, for the most part, he is kind of driven by this need to have more of it. But we're going to talk about that a little bit more. To avoid being seen by Susan and Lucy, we see that she is able to change the appearance of living creatures by shapeshifting. So she's also a shapeshifter. She makes herself to look like a boulder, and she makes her dwarf to look like a tree stump in order to accomplish not being seen. And yeah, I mean, included in her knowledge is her knowledge of magic. She's very educated and aware of the deep magic from the dawn of time. And as we touched on the last episode, she's not familiar with the deeper magic, but deep magic made her be able to claim ownership of any traitors that there happened to be, and could then kill any being that belonged to her. And we see that later with Edmund. However, yeah, like I mentioned, her knowledge of the deep magic was incomplete. She never had power over the deep magic, but was granted rights under it. Does that make sense how I said that? She never had power over the deep magic, but she had rights to use it. Aslan revealed that there is a deeper magic from the dawn of time, from before the dawn of time, and gave Aslan power over the witch and over death itself. And she was so powerful that no one dared to challenge her reign for 100 years. Even the powerful leaders from the neighboring country of Calormen refused to come near. They wanted to stay away from her. And with no humans in Narnia, there was no one to challenge her for the throne either. Until that day, in Narnia year 1000, which would have been Earth year 1940, when the witch met Edmund. I can imagine the witch would have been confused. She drove all the humans out of Narnia, so where did this one come from? And I think that's why I read this kind of in the cold open too, but like she asked him, like, what are you? Like a couple times she asks him, like, what are you? Like, I feel like she might have been a little bit shocked. and confused and wondering, like, she wanted to make sure, like, is this actually a human? Like, what is going on here? And she learns that he had gotten into Narnia by magic, and it's clear that she secretly knew that he was one of four. I think because of the prophecy, she kind of just had a feeling like if he is now here by magic, this is probably related to the prophecy. Because, I don't know, it's magic. So I feel like that kind of tipped her off. And honestly, the witch had no scruples. She would do anything and everything to get what she wants. And honestly, and this is going to lead us into our next topic here, but she would do anything, including grooming someone else. "But what are you?" said the queen again. "Are you a great, overgrown dwarf that has cut off its beard?" "No, your majesty," said Edmund. I never had a beard. I'm a boy." "A boy," she said. "Do you mean you're a son of Adam?" Edmund stood still, saying nothing. He was too confused by this time to understand what the question meant. "I see you are an idiot, whatever else you may be," said the queen. "Answer me, once and for all, or I shall lose my patience. Are you human?" "Yes, your majesty," said Edmund. "And how, pray, did you come to enter my dominions?" "Please, your majesty, I came through a wardrobe." "A wardrobe? What do you mean?" I opened a door and just found myself here, your majesty," said Edmund. "Ha," said the queen, speaking more to herself than to him. "A door. A door from the world of men. I've heard of such things. This may wreck all, but he is only one, and he is easily dealt with." As she spoke these words, she rose from her seat and looked Edmund full in the face, her eyes flaming. At the same moment, she raised her wand. Edmund felt sure that she was going to do something dreadful, but he seemed unable to move. Then, just as he gave himself up for lost, she appeared to change her mind. "My poor child," she said in quite a different voice. "How cold you look. Come and sit with me here on the sledge, and I will put my mantle around you while we talk." Edmund did not like this arrangement at all, but he dared not disobey. He stepped onto the sledge and sat at her feet, and she put a fold of her fur mantle round him and tucked it well in. "Perhaps something hot to drink?" said the queen. "Should you like that?" "Yes, please, your majesty," said Edmund, whose teeth were chattering. The queen took from somewhere among her wrappings a very small bottle, which looked as if it were made of copper. Then, holding out her arm, she let one drop fall from it on the snow beside the sledge. Edmund saw the drop for a second in mid-air, shining like a diamond. But the moment it touched the snow, there was a hissing sound, and there stood a jeweled cup full of something that steamed. The dwarf immediately took this and handed it to Edmund with a bow and a smile. Not a very nice smile. Edmund felt much better as he began to sip the hot drink. It was something he had never tasted before, very sweet and foamy and creamy, and it warmed him right down to his toes. "It is dull, son of Adam, to drink without eating," said the queen presently. "What would you like best to eat?" "Turkish delight, please, your majesty," said Edmund. The queen let another drop fall from her bottle onto the snow, and instantly there appeared a round box tied with green silk ribbon, which, when opened, turned out to contain several pounds of the best Turkish delight. Each piece was sweet and light to the very center, and Edmund had never tasted anything more delicious. He was quite warm now, and very comfortable. While he was eating, the queen kept asking him questions. At first, Edmund tried to remember that it is rude to speak with one's mouth full, but soon he forgot about this and thought only of trying to shovel down as much Turkish delight as he could. And the more he ate, the more he wanted to eat, and he never asked himself why the queen should be so inquisitive. She got him to tell her that he had one brother and two sisters, and that one of his sisters had already been in Narnia and had met a faun there, and that no one except himself and his brother and his sisters knew anything about Narnia. She seemed especially interested in the fact that there were 4 of them, and kept on coming back to it. "Are you sure there are just 4 of you?" she asked. "2 sons of Adam and 2 daughters of Eve? Neither more nor less?" And Edmund, with his mouth full of Turkish delight, kept on saying, "Yes, I told you that before," and forgetting to call her Your Majesty. But she didn't seem to mind now. At last, the Turkish delight was all finished, and Edmund was looking very hard at the empty box and wishing that she would ask him whether he would like some more. Probably the queen knew quite well what he was thinking, for she knew, though Edmund did not, that this was enchanted Turkish delight, and that anyone who had once tasted it would want more and more of it, and would even, if they were allowed, go on eating it until they killed themselves. But she did not offer him any more. Instead, she said to him, "Son of Adam, I should so much like to meet your brother and your 2 sisters. Will you bring them to see me?" "I'll try," said Edmund, still looking at the empty box. "Because if you did come again, bringing them with you, of course, I'd be able to give you some more Turkish delight. I can't do it now. The magic will only work once. In my house, it would be another matter." "Why can't we go to your house now?" said Edmund. When he had first got onto the sledge, he had been more afraid that she might drive away with him to some unknown place from which he would not be able to get back, but he had forgotten about that fear now. "It is a lovely place, my house," said the queen. "I am sure you would like it. There are whole rooms full of Turkish delight, and what's more, I have no children of my own. I want a nice boy whom I could bring up as a prince, and who would be king of Narnia when I am gone. While he was prince, he would wear a gold crown and eat Turkish delight all day long. And you are much the cleverest and handsomest young man I've ever met. I think I would like to make you the prince, someday, when you bring the others to visit me." "Why not now?" said Edmund. His face had become very red, and his mouth and fingers were sticky. He did not look either clever or handsome, whatever the queen might say. "Oh, but if I took you there now," she said, "I shouldn't see your brother and your sisters. I very much want to know your charming relations. You are to be the prince, and, later on, the king. That is understood. But you must have courtiers and nobles. I will make your brother a duke and your sisters duchesses." "There's nothing special about them," said Edmund. "And anyway, I could always bring them some other time." "Ah, but once you are in my house," said the queen, "you might forget all about them. You would be enjoying yourself so much that you wouldn't want the bother of going to fetch them. No, you must go back to your own country now, and come to me another day with them. You understand? It is no good coming without them." "But I don't even know the way back to my own country," pleaded Edmund. "That's easy," answered the queen. "Do you see that lamp?" She pointed with her wand, and Edmund turned and saw the same lamppost under which Lucy had met the faun. Straight on, Beyond that is the way of the world of men. And now look the other way. Here, she pointed in the opposite direction. And tell me if you can see two little hills rising above the trees. I think I can, said Edmund. Well, my house is between those two hills, so next time you come, you have only to find the lamppost and look for those two hills and walk through the wood till you reach my house. But remember, you must bring the others with you. I might have got to be very angry with you if you come alone. I'll do my best, said Edmund. And by the way, said the Queen, you needn't tell them about me. It would be fun to keep it a secret between us two, wouldn't it? Make it a surprise for them? Just bring them along to the two hills. A clever boy like you will easily think of some excuse for doing that. And when you come to my house, you could just say, let's see who lives here, or something like that. I am sure that would be best. If your sister has met one of the fawns, she may have heard strange stories about me. Nasty stories that might make her afraid to come to me. Fawns will say anything, you know. And now, please, said Edmund suddenly. Please, couldn't I just have one piece of Turkish delight to eat on the way home? No, said the Queen with a laugh. You must wait till next time. While she spoke, she signaled to the dwarf to drive on. But as the sledge swept away out of sight, the Queen waved to Edmund, calling out, next time, don't forget, come soon. Okay, so we see from this reading that the witch, or the Queen as she would like to call herself, uses some grooming tactics that are still used to this day. And I didn't necessarily pick up on this the first time I read it. The first time I read it, it was kind of like, oh yeah, like she's manipulating him. She's, tempting him and stuff like that. But that just scratches the surface. And as I was kind of doing some research for this episode, like I found like she is like that just scratches the surface. She's doing much more to actually groom him, and that they are actually common tactics. And so it just kind of made me uncomfortable then the second time actually rereading it and seeing that for myself. It was a little bit uncomfortable, but I want to go over 5 points, 5 things that she does to, in a way, manipulate him. The first point I want to make is that she insults him and she scares him. And so doing this, like she calls him an idiot. And I mean, I don't know about you, but that right away is like that. I don't like that when someone does that to me, right? But then she has him sit at her feet, and he really didn't want to. This put him in an uncomfortable position, and I mean, he felt forced to do it. And I mean, anytime someone's put in that kind of position, and I mean, he felt like she was the queen because, I mean, he hadn't met anybody yet. He didn't know any better. And so he felt forced to do it, like, and I want to go a little bit farther back too. In the text that I read, it mentions that, he did not like the way that she was looking at him. So right off the bat, he's put off by just the fact that she was looking at him a bit strange, or however it was. I mean, it probably caught her off guard again that there was suddenly like someone that looks like a human in Narnia. So anyways, he's in this position, and then she makes him feel comfortable while he's there. And I mean, C.S. Lewis even wrote that he dared not disobey. She repeats to him 6 times that he must bring his siblings to her. And she's trying to make sure that this thought is in his head so that he thinks about it and he remembers it. And she also wants to kind of cover her bases, and she tells him that he cannot trust fawns and to not tell his siblings about her. And so the reason that I see her doing this is that, I mean, he shared with her that Lucy had already been in Narnia and had met a fawn. And so, I mean, she knows that this fawn will know the truth about her and that she's not a queen and that she's actually an evil witch and all this. And so she tells him that fawns can't be trusted because he knows that his sister will probably share what the fawn has told him, right? And so she's trying to use this as a way to get Edmund on her side. And then as far as her telling him to not tell his siblings, I mean, I think probably for similar reasons, is that now Lucy's going to have a different story, different point of view on everything than he is. And so it would probably be easier for him just to not tell them. And so she suggests that instead, when he brings them there, to just tell them, hey, let's go see who lives here, and all that. And so the third point is that she asks him to keep a secret. And now I think, as just rule of thumb, when a grown-up tells a child to keep a secret, that's a red flag. I think in any situation, I can't right now think of a situation where that would be a good thing. I think grown-ups are kind of not doing the right thing when they ask a child to keep a secret for any reason. And you can disagree with that if you want, but that's kind of how I'm seeing that. The fourth thing I want to highlight is that now she compliments him. So she insults him, she puts him down, puts him in this uncomfortable position, and then starts making him comfortable. So now she's complimenting him. She calls him clever twice, and she calls him handsome once. And then she also makes him feel good by saying that he's special and that she's going to make him a king, and she's giving him all of these promises. And so that kind of goes into the fifth thing, where she also gives him something that he really wants more of, and that being the Turkish delight. Edmund is willing to keep the secret, and he's willing to lie for her because he wants this enchanted Turkish delight. And so when he does meet up with Lucy again at the end of the chapter, Lucy tells him that she's not a queen and that she's actually a witch. And based off of all the manipulation and things that the witch has done to get his confidence up and now tempt him with something he desires more of, he chooses to trust the witch instead of his own sister, which is a really sad turn of events that we see happen. But by the end of the chapter, he's convinced that he must bring his siblings to her. And he now feels like he owes her something. And guys, this is just classic grooming tactics. And unfortunately, it worked way too easy on Edmund, my poor guy. I mean, he's honestly one of, if not my favorite character. And I'm going to do an episode on him, and then we can obviously talk about that there. But continuing on with this, at first, it seemed like the witch was going to kill Edmund because it was just him there, and she thought that he would be easily dealt with. And all of a sudden, she changes her mind. And I think what happened here is she realized that, yes, it would be easy to just get rid of him. But if she could manipulate him to get the other three there, she could just kill them all and then problem solved, right? And I think that goes back to the question of the prophecy. I think if that's the main part, I think, is like the two sons of Adam, the two daughters of Eve. If that doesn't happen, I don't know if the rest happens. And I mean, I don't know. And I noticed that after she compliments him and calls him clever and handsome, his face was very red and his hands were sticky from the Turkish delight. And C.S. Lewis makes a point to mention that he did not look clever or handsome. And I think this just shows that she is willing to say anything to get him on her side and to trust her. And so here also, like, she knew that the Turkish delight was enchanted, and that once he tasted it, he would always crave more and would eat it until he died. She knew this, and she used it to her advantage. As I mentioned before, she's a master of magic, and which we see with the enchanted Turkish delight, but she's also a master manipulator. She could see that Edmund was not clever or handsome and in the moment, and part of the grooming tactic, she gives him the compliments anyways. And I think we see the witch, if Aslan represents Jesus or is Jesus, I think the witch is, obviously supposed to be the devil in some way. Maybe not as directly as Aslan is Jesus, but I think that is kind of supposed to be like kind of the connection there. The devil also manipulates and tempts people. And John 8:44 actually describes him as the father of lies. And so I think this is a massive similarity between the witch and the devil. And so kind of continuing on with the story, all 4 children end up back in Narnia, and Edmund fails to bring his siblings to the witch. He shows up to her castle alone, and she gets mad. And I mean, rightfully so. I mean, I don't know if that's actually right, but she did warn him. She warned him that if he came without his siblings, she would get mad. And he did. She rages out on him, and she actually takes him in as a prisoner. And while this is happening, the snow is actually beginning to melt. The prophecy's coming true. And so for the first time in 1,000 years, the witch's power is weakening. This meant that Aslan was on the move. He was back in Narnia. And the Narnians felt hope. And in this hope, they decided to put an army together. Edmund, meanwhile, had been having a most disappointing time. When the dwarf had gone to get the sledge ready, he expected that the witch would start being nice to him, as she had been at their last meeting. But she said nothing at all. And when at last Edmund plucked up the courage to say, "Please, your majesty, could I have some more Turkish delight? You said," she answered, "Silence, fool!" Then she appeared to change her mind, and said, as if to herself, "And yet it will not do to have the brat fainting on the way," and once more clapped her hands. Another dwarf had appeared. "Bring the human creature some food and drink," she said. The dwarf went away and presently returned, bringing an iron bowl with some water in it and an iron plate with a hunk of dry bread on it. He grinned in a repulsive manner as he set them down on the floor beside Edmund and said, "Turkish delight for the little prince? Ha ha ha." "Take it away," said Edmund sulkily. "I don't want dry bread." But the witch suddenly turned on him with such a terrible expression on her face that he apologized and began to nibble at the bread, though it was so stale that he could hardly get it down. "You may be glad enough of it before you taste bread again," said the witch. While he was still chewing away, the first dwarf came back and announced that the sledge was ready. The white witch rose and went out, ordering Edmund to go with her. The snow was again falling as they came into the courtyard, but she took no notice of that and made Edmund sit beside her on the sledge. But before they drove off, she called Malgrim, and he came bounding like an enormous dog to the side of the sledge. "Take with you the swiftest of wolves, and go out at once to the house of the beavers," said the witch, "and kill whatever you find there. If they are already gone, then make all speed to the stone table. But do not be seen. Wait for me there in hiding. I, meanwhile, must go many miles to the west before I find a place where I can drive across the river. You may overtake these humans before they reach the stone table." You will know what to do when you find them." "I hear and obey, O Queen," growled the wolf, and immediately he shot away into the snow and darkness as quickly as a horse can gallop. In a few minutes he had called another wolf, and was with him down on the dam sniffing out the beaver's house. But of course they found it empty. It would have been a dreadful thing for the beavers and the children if the night had remained fine, for the wolves would then have been able to follow their trail, and 10 to 1 would have overtaken them before they had got to the cave. But now that the snow had begun again, the scent was cold, and even the footprints were covered up. Meanwhile, the dwarf whipped up the reindeer, and the witch and Edmund drove out under the archway and on and away into the darkness and the cold. This was a terrible journey for Edmund, who had no coat. Before they had been going 1/4 of an hour, all the front of him was covered with snow. He soon stopped trying to shake it off, because as quickly as he did that, a new lot gathered, and he was so tired. Soon he was wet to the skin, and oh, how miserable he was. It didn't look now as if the witch intended to make him a king. All the things he had said to make himself believe that she was good and kind, and that her side was really the right side, sounded to him silly now. He would have given anything to meet the others at this moment, even Peter. The only way to comfort himself now was to try to believe that the whole thing was a dream, and that he might wake up at any moment. And as they went on, hour after hour, it did come to seem like a dream. This lasted longer than I could describe, even if I wrote pages and pages about it. But I will skip to the time when the snow had stopped and the morning had come, and they were racing along in the daylight. And still they went on, with no sound but the everlasting swish of the snow and the cracking of the reindeer's harness. And then at last the witch said, "What have we here? Stop!" And they did. How Edmund hoped she was going to say something about breakfast. But she had stopped for quite a different reason. A little way off, at the foot of a tree, sat a merry party. A squirrel and his wife with their children, and 2 satyrs, and a dwarf, and an old dog fox, all on stools round a table. Edmund couldn't quite see what they were eating, but it smelled lovely, and there seemed to be decorations of holly, and he wasn't at all sure that he didn't see something like a plum pudding. At the moment when the sledge stopped, the fox, who was obviously the oldest person present, had just risen to its feet, holding a glass in its paw as if it was going to say something. But when the whole party saw the sledge stopping and who was in it, all the gaiety went out of their faces. The father squirrel stopped eating with his fork halfway to his mouth, and one of the satyrs stopped with its fork actually in its mouth, and the baby squirrels squeaked with terror. "What is the meaning of this?" asked the witch queen. Nobody answered. "Speak, vermin," she said again. "Or do you want my dwarf to find you a tongue with his whip? What is the meaning of this gluttony, this waste, this self-indulgence? Where did you get all these things?" "Please, your majesty," said the fox, "we were given them. And if I might make so bold as to drink your majesty's very good health—" "Who gave them to you?" said the witch. Father Christmas," stammered the fox. "What?" roared the witch, springing from the sledge and taking a few strides nearer to the terrified animals. "He has not been here. He cannot have been here. How dare you? But no. Say you have been lying, and you shall even now be forgiven." At that moment, one of the young squirrels lost its head completely. He has, it squeaked, beating its little spoon on the table. Edmund saw the witch bite her lips so that a drop of blood appeared on her white cheek. Then she raised her wand. "Oh, don't! Don't! Please don't!" shouted Edmund. But even while he was shouting, She had waved her wand, and instantly, where the merry party had been, there were only statues of creatures. One with its stone fork fixed forever halfway to its stone mouth, seated around a stone table on which there were stone plates and a stone plum pudding. "As for you," said the witch, giving Edmund a stunning blow to the face as she remounted the sledge, "let that teach you to ask favor for spies and traitors. Drive on." And Edmund, for the first time in this story, felt sorry for someone besides himself. It seemed so pitiful to think of those little stone figures sitting there all the silent days and the dark nights, year after year, till the moss grew on them, and at last even their faces crumbled away. So during this time, as the witch's power is weakening, Father Christmas was able to return to Narnia. And as the witch, with the dwarf and Edmund, her prisoner, are journeying to the stone table, they come across a Christmas party in the woods. Some creatures, including a family of squirrels, 2 satyrs, a dwarf, and an old dog fox, were sitting at a round table and eating. Edmund is hungry and smells the food. And just a little thing about Edmund, he loves food. Even as we will go into Prince Caspian, we'll see Edmund's love of food. I don't know if it's entirely because of the Turkish delight addiction or what, but it's just kind of a theme throughout Edmund's life is that he loves food. But he smells their food, and it is revealed that Father Christmas, of all people, gave them holly and holly decorations and actually some plum pudding. The witch is actually willing to forgive the partygoers for mentioning Father Christmas if, they deny it. And it is possible that the witch didn't fully believe Father Christmas was back, so maybe she wanted them to convince her of that. But I think either way, she was shocked and angry by the news that Father Christmas was back. So angry that she actually bit her lips so hard that they bled out onto her cheek. And I don't know about you, but I feel like you'd have to be pretty upset to bite your lip so hard that it bleeds. Just imagine that kind of anger. And in her outrage, she ends up turning these animals and their utensils, as well as the table, into stone. And Edmund tries to stop her from doing this. And as a result, she actually hits him in the face. And what we see here, we see more of the witch's character. She obviously gets very angry and very upset when things are not going her way. And then we also see more of her violent side as she turns the creatures into stone and even hits Edmund for speaking out against her. Until now, she's angry and she's obviously cold and stern, but she's been keeping it together. And now as her power is weakening, the snow is starting to melt. Now there's news that Father Christmas is back. It's showing that she's losing her power and she can't handle it. So so with spring being on the way, the sledge ends up getting stuck in the mud, and it gets stuck in the mud. And when the dwarf can't get it unstuck, the witch decides that they will walk the rest of the way. The whole thing about winter ending and spring on its way, it gave the Narnians so much hope. I can imagine 1,000 years of winter, probably for the life of obviously the life of all of the Narnians at that time. They knew nothing but winter. And so to see something other than that must have been very exciting and hopeful. And it actually reminds me of Psalm 30, verse 5. Not directly, but it reminds me of this because of the part that says that joy comes in the morning. You know, the trials in our lives are only for a short period of time. And there is a joy found in Christ. And even if we endure these trials for the rest of our lives, the joy will then come in the next life. And that's just how it is sometimes. If we don't find the joy in this life, it's in the next. But especially while we're here, there is hope and joy to be found in Christ. And so I'm kind of seeing that sort of thing with the Narnians right now, is they're seeing these things happen, these signs that are pointing to basically some sort of savior or something different happening. And I see that, yeah, they're full of joy and hope. Things are changing. And I think it's something really cool and exciting to see for the Narnians. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to talk about something that is called the Narnian Revolution. So the witch, she's getting nervous, and with the news of Father Christmas returning, the snow melting, it's clear Aslan is on his way, and she's panicking. And so she decides that she's just going to kill Edmund so that the prophecy won't come true. And this kind of makes me think, like, maybe she should have just done that at the beginning when she met him. But she had a change of plans, and now things aren't going her way. And so she has to, go back to plan A. And she mentions that she would prefer to do it at the stone table because that was the proper place, and it had been done there in the past. And that kind of made me think, with the deep magic, any traitor belongs to the White Witch. And so I wonder how many times she's actually killed somebody on the stone table in her 1,000-year reign. We don't obviously know this answer, just something I thought about. But as it turned out, Aslan had his camp at the stone table, so she couldn't do it there. She has to come up again with a new plan. And they're in a very dark forest. She tells her minions to prepare the victim and takes off her outer mantle, and her arms are terribly white. Now, try to imagine this. The book describes it as so it's a very dark forest. You can't see anything, but she takes off her outer mantle, and her arms are so white that Edmund can see her in the dark. I imagine that is just terribly white. Like we talked about before, the snow and icing sugar, the paper, references to that. But now also it's apparently so bright that you can see it in the dark. And at this point, things get a little bit weird, and I don't fully know what to make of it, but Edmund's collar is unbuttoned, and his shirt is folded back at the neck, and his hair is being pulled so that he's looking upward. Now, all he has at this point is his senses of feeling that he's against a tree, and he can hear a whiz sound, and realizes that it is a knife being sharpened. Now, C.S. Lewis obviously wanted to paint a picture of a scary environment for Edmund. I don't think this is what's happening, so don't hear me saying that this is what was for sure happening. It almost kind of seems like a moment of sexual assault. Like, why is his collar unbuttoned and his shirt folded back at the neck? Like, why? I don't know the significance of it. Like, why not just kill him? But I reread the chapter, and when I was writing this episode, and while it does seem weird, I think all that's happening here is the dwarf is trying to expose Edmund's neck, and he pulls his head back so that she can go after the throat. I think that's what's likely happening here, but it was definitely kind of weird, gave me kind of weird vibes. But before doing this, a rescue party actually saves Edmund, and during the rescue, I actually have to make a correction from earlier in this episode. Earlier in this episode, I had said that when the White Witch was hiding from Susan and Lucy, she turned herself into a boulder. It's actually now. So, correction. Now, when they come to rescue Edmund, the witch and the dwarf are nowhere to be found, and Lewis mentions a boulder and a stump that are moving closer and talking to each other. The witch is using her magic to make things appear like they aren't. And so I just wanted to give that correction there. Sorry about that, guys. I definitely want to, if I make a mistake, correct it. So this is really pointing to the devil and how he makes things appear the way that they aren't. 2 Corinthians 11:14 describes Satan as transforming himself into an angel of light. And there is actually a warning about this in Isaiah. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. That's Isaiah 5:20. And so Edmund is brought back to Aslan's camp, and the witch shows up there to retrieve him. She explains that because Edmund is a traitor, he belongs to her, according to the deep magic. Aslan has a private conference with her and decides to take Edmund's place. The witch accepts this offer because if she could kill Aslan, it would all be over. There would be no one as powerful as her, and she could truly be the queen of Narnia and the empress of the world. So because of this, Aslan relocates his army, and that night the witch takes the high ground at the stone table. Aslan shows up to be a sacrifice for Edmund, and this obviously again, a clear image of Christ's sacrifice for us on the cross. And like Christ, Aslan was willing. He walked in there and laid down on the table, accepting his fate. The witch's face was twitching with passion. I imagine she must have been waiting the entire 1,000 years to do this. And I mean, we've seen even before this how angry she was getting with things not going her way. And now finally it's her time. She's going to get victory. And even while Aslan's laying on the table, the witch and all the evil creatures around them, they were all still afraid and panicked until the end. That's just how powerful Aslan was, that even though he's willing to die, they're still scared. And I think that's just another clear sign of Christ. It's like, the demons shudder at the sound of his name, right? So she plunges her knife into Aslan's heart, killing the great cat. And with Aslan out of the way, she now moves her army to the fields of Bruna, where she attacked the Narnian army, which was led by Peter. I imagine, Aslan's out of the way, but maybe just to make sure, she better still kill the 4 children. And since now there's an army, obviously now they got to go to war because it's an army. You need an army to take out an army. And she had the upper hand in the battle as her army was larger in size and had a far more brutal tactic. And if she knew what happened on the stone table, I don't think she would have been so confident. As we talked about in the last episode, Aslan resurrected and then went and restored all the statues that were in her courtyard. All the Narnians that she had turned into stone, they were all brought as reinforcements to the battle, kind of evening things out. And it was then that Aslan let out a mighty roar that actually shook all of Narnia and flung himself upon the witch, and in an instant the battle was over and the witch and her 1,000-year reign of terror were over. Thank you everyone so much for listening. I had a lot of fun taking a deeper look into the White Witch of Narnia. I hope you all enjoyed, and just remember, the witch represents the devil in endless ways, from her manipulation and her grooming tactics, to her dishonesty, her dark magic. Lewis was not hiding this, and I do hope that you all learned something that you haven't already known. This was something that I felt was important to share as part of, I felt like it needed its own episode, that I couldn't just, mention these things and just move past it. I felt like it needed to have its own dedicated episode. And so I hope you enjoyed. And I want to just say again, make sure that you check out the description of this episode for all my social media links, as well as where you can support the show and get a shout out in a future episode. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time, stay faithful.